I still remember the day I met Vanessa. She walked into my life like a storm, confident, stunning, and with this infectious laugh that made you forget everything else. I was a single father then, raising my son Ryan after a messy divorce. Vanessa and I connected quickly, and within a year, we were married. I thought I had found my second chance at happiness. Vanessa was 10 years younger than me, just barely in her early 30s, but she had this maturity about her that belied her age. She immediately bonded with Ryan, who had just turned 20 when we got married. Their relationship made me happy. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a complete family again. For the next 2 years, everything seemed perfect, or so I thought. Vanessa and I built a life together while Ryan focused on college. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, things began to shift. It started with little moments, fleeting glances between Vanessa and Ryan that seemed too familiar. Or the way they'd laugh at some inside joke I didn't understand. I shrugged it off, chalking it up to their shared sense of humor. But the seed of doubt had been planted, even if I didn't know it yet. One evening I came home early from work, surprising Vanessa and Ryan. They were in the living room, sitting closer than usual, their laughter quickly dying as I entered. I brushed it off, thinking, "Don't be ridiculous, Brian. After all, Ryan was my son. Vanessa was my wife. There was no reason to suspect anything." But those small, innocuous moments kept piling up. One night, I woke up thirsty and went downstairs to get some water. As I passed by the living room, I saw them sitting on the couch. Vanessa had her hand on Ryan's shoulder, and they were whispering. The light from the TV flickered across their faces. When they saw me, Vanessa immediately pulled her hand away, her expression carefully neutral. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked casually. "Just getting some water," I replied, pretending I hadn't noticed anything. The next morning, as Vanessa was cooking breakfast, I decided to bring it up. "You and Ryan seem to be spending a lot of time together lately," I said, keeping my tone light. She looked up, her expression calm. "He's your son, Brian. Of course, I'm going to spend time with him. I want us to be a family." Her answer seemed reasonable, but something about her tone didn't sit right with me. The next few weeks passed uneventfully, but my unease didn't go away. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch. Every time I saw them together, I couldn't help but notice how easily they talked, how often Vanessa touched his arm or shoulder when they spoke. It wasn't overtly inappropriate, but it felt intimate. Then one afternoon, I came home earlier than usual. The house was quiet, almost eerily so. I walked upstairs, calling out for Vanessa. "In the shower!" she yelled from the bathroom. I decided to check on Ryan, but his bedroom door was ajar, and he wasn't inside. Something caught my eye, a flash drive on his desk. I hesitated for a moment before picking it up. I plugged it into my laptop, expecting to find school projects, or maybe music. Instead, what I found made my blood run cold. There were dozens of photos, some innocent, like family gatherings or vacations. But others weren't. There were pictures of Vanessa in the house, taken from odd angles. Some showed her in the kitchen, some in the living room, but the most unsettling ones were of her in our bedroom. She wasn't naked, but her poses were suggestive, lying on the bed, stretching in ways that highlighted her curves. And then, there was a video. My hands trembled as I clicked on it. The video was shaky, as if taken secretly. Vanessa was in the bathroom, her back to the camera. She was wearing a robe that barely covered her. She laughed softly, looking over her shoulder, at the camera. "Ryan, turn that off," she said playfully. But she didn't look angry. If anything, she seemed flirtatious. I felt sick. At that moment, Vanessa walked into the room, her hair damp from the shower. She froze when she saw the flash drive in my hand. "Where did you find that?" she asked, her voice sharp. "It was on Ryan's desk," I said evenly. "Care to explain these?" She stared at me for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then she sighed, sitting down on the bed. "Ryan's been infatuated with me," she admitted reluctantly. I didn't want to tell you because I didn't want to cause problems between you two. He's your son, Brian. I didn't know how to handle it. Her words seemed plausible, but the way she avoided my gaze made me doubt her sincerity. Why didn't you tell me earlier? I pressed. I thought it was harmless, she said quickly. He's just a young man with a crush. I didn't think it would go this far. Her explanation didn't fully convince me, but I didn't push further. At least, not then. I couldn't shake the feeling that Vanessa wasn't telling me the whole truth. Her explanation about Ryan's crush didn't sit right. If it was so harmless, why hadn't she told me earlier? And why had she seemed so nervous when I confronted her? The next morning, I decided to talk to Ryan. I didn't want to accuse him of anything outright, so I approached the conversation carefully. Ryan, we need to talk, I said after breakfast. Sure, what's up? He leaned back in his chair, looking calm and unconcerned. I found something on your flash drive. I began, watching his reaction closely. His easy demeanor faltered for a moment, but he quickly recovered. Oh? What did you find? I hesitated. Photos of Vanessa. Videos too. Care to explain? Ryan's expression darkened. Look, Dad, I didn't mean any harm. I think Vanessa is beautiful, okay. But it's not what you think. It's just admiration. Admiration. The word sounded hollow, like a weak excuse. And the video in the bathroom? That looked like more than just admiration, Ryan. His jaw tightened. It's not a big deal. I didn't do anything. Vanessa didn't do anything. You're blowing this out of proportion. I wanted to believe him, but his defensiveness only fueled my doubts. Just be careful, I said finally. Vanessa told me about your feelings. I need you to respect her, and our family. Ryan nodded, but his expression was unreadable. For a while, things seemed to settle down. Vanessa and Ryan kept their distance from each other, at least when I was around. But the tension in the house was palpable, like a storm brewing just beneath the surface. One evening, I came home late after a business meeting. The house was quiet, the lights dimmed. I walked upstairs, expecting to find Vanessa in bed. As I passed by Ryan's room, I noticed. As I passed Ryan's room that night, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. The dim glow of a lamp spilled into the hallway. Curious, I glanced inside. At first, I didn't register what I was seeing. Vanessa was sitting on the edge of Ryan's bed, her face close to his as if they were sharing a secret. Then I saw her hand resting lightly on his knee. The air felt like it had been sucked out of the room. Vanessa? I said, my voice sharper than I intended. She jumped, quickly pulling her hand away and standing up. Brian! You're home late. Ryan looked away, his expression carefully blank. What's going on? I asked, stepping into the room. I was just checking on Ryan, Vanessa said quickly. He said he wasn't feeling well. Ryan nodded, playing along. Yeah, I've been feeling off all day. The explanation seemed plausible enough, but something about their body language set off alarms in my head. Vanessa avoided my gaze, fidgeting with the hem of her shirt, while Ryan refused to meet my eyes. Okay, I said slowly. But it's late. Maybe you should go to bed, Vanessa. She nodded, brushing past me. Good night, Ryan. Feel better. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching Ryan. He didn't look sick, he looked guilty. Good night, Dad, he mumbled, pulling the blanket up to his chest. I left without another word, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd interrupted something. The next day, Vanessa acted as if nothing had happened. She was cheerful and attentive, cooking breakfast and chatting with me like everything was normal. But I couldn't stop thinking about the scene in Ryan's room. I decided to trust my instincts. After Vanessa left to run errands, I went back to Ryan's room. At first, I didn't find anything unusual. His desk was cluttered with textbooks and notebooks, and his bed was unmade as usual. But then I noticed his laptop, partially hidden under a pile of papers. I hesitated. Invading Ryan's privacy felt wrong, but my gut told me I needed answers. I opened the laptop, and the screen lit up. To my surprise, it wasn't password protected. A folder on the desktop caught my eye, labeled simply with Vanessa's name. I clicked on it. Inside were dozens of files, photos, videos, and even documents. The photos were the same type I'd found on the flash drive, candid shots of Vanessa around the house. But the videos. I opened one and immediately regretted it. The footage was shaky, clearly taken with a hidden camera. It showed Vanessa in our bedroom, changing clothes. The angle made it clear the camera had been hidden in the closet. My heart raced as I clicked through more files. Each one was worse than the last. One video showed Vanessa sitting on the couch, completely unaware she was being filmed. Another showed her in the shower, the camera capturing her through the slightly ajar bathroom door. I felt sick. But the worst was yet to come. In one file, I saw Ryan and Vanessa together. They were sitting on the couch, talking softly. Vanessa laughed at something Ryan said, then leaned closer to him. She rested her hand on his chest, and he didn't pull away. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking. The evidence was damning. Whatever was going on between them wasn't one-sided. I didn't confront them immediately. I needed time to process what I'd seen, and to figure out what to do next. The weight of what I had seen on Ryan's laptop pressed down on me like a ton of bricks. That night, I lay in bed beside Vanessa, unable to sleep. She was already dozing peacefully, oblivious to the storm raging in my mind. I kept replaying the videos in my head, each one raising more questions than answers. How long had this been going on? Did Ryan initiate it, or was Vanessa complicit? And most importantly, how could I confront them without destroying my family? The next day, I decided to dig deeper. I needed more than just a few videos. I needed undeniable proof. After Vanessa left for work, I installed a tracking app on her phone. It felt invasive, but at this point, I had no choice. If she was betraying me, I needed to know the full extent. I also placed a small voice recorder in her purse, hidden beneath the lining. It didn't take long for the app to yield results. That afternoon, while I was at work, I received a notification. Vanessa's location showed her at a nearby motel, a place I knew she had no reason to visit. My hands clenched into fists as I stared at the screen. I resisted the urge to confront her immediately. Instead, I called Ryan. "Hey, Dad." "What's up?" he answered casually. "Are you home?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, I'm at campus right now." "Why?" "Just checking," I said, hanging up without further explanation. If Ryan was telling the truth, that left only one possibility. Vanessa wasn't meeting him, she was meeting someone else. That evening, I waited for Vanessa to come home. My heart pounded as I sat on the couch, rehearsing what I would say. When she finally walked through the door, I could tell something was off. Her hair was slightly messy, and she had a faint sheen of sweat on her forehead. "Hey, Brian," she said, smiling as if nothing was wrong. "How was your day?" "It was fine," I replied, forcing a smile. "How about you? Anything interesting happen?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second, but quickly recovered. "Not much. Just ran some errands." I nodded, studying her closely. "Did you stop by that motel while you were out running errands?" Her eyes widened, and for a moment I thought she might faint. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed her the tracking app. "I know you were there, Vanessa. Don't lie to me." Her face turned pale, and she sank onto the couch. "Brian, I can explain." "Then start explaining," I snapped, my patience wearing thin. She took a deep breath, her hands trembling. "I went to meet a friend. A private conversation, that's all." "A friend?" I scoffed. "Don't insult my intelligence, Vanessa. Who were you meeting? And don't tell me it was Ryan because he said he was at campus." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, and that was all the confirmation I needed. "Does this have to do with him?" I demanded, my voice rising. "Is there something going on between you and Ryan?" No! She exclaimed, shaking her head furiously. It's not what you think, Brian. I swear! Then what the hell is it? I shouted. Tears filled her eyes as she buried her face in her hands. It's complicated. Uncomplicated, I said coldly. She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I'll tell you everything. Just please don't hate me. I didn't respond. My heart was pounding, my fists clenched. Whatever she was about to say, I knew it was going to change everything. Vanessa sat in silence for what felt like an eternity, her hands trembling in her lap. I could see the weight of whatever she was about to say pressing down on her. Finally, she took a deep breath. Brian, I messed up, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. But it wasn't what you think, not at first. I didn't say anything, letting her continue. It started about 6 months ago, she said, avoiding my eyes. Ryan and I were spending more time together while you were working late. At first, it was innocent. We'd talk, watch TV. I was just trying to bond with him. Her voice cracked, and she wiped at her tears. But then, things changed. He started opening up to me about how lonely he felt, about how much pressure he was under at school. He told me things he said he couldn't tell you. And you thought it was okay to cross the line? I said, my voice shaking with anger. I didn't mean for it to happen, she exclaimed, her tears flowing freely now. He kissed me first, Brian. I swear. I told him it was wrong, but he kept pushing. And I was stupid enough to let it happen. I stood up, pacing the room. My head was spinning, my emotions a volatile mix of rage, betrayal, and heartbreak. How far did it go, Vanessa? I asked, my voice cold. She hesitated, her silence speaking volumes. Everything, she admitted finally. It happened a few times. I hated myself for it, but I couldn't stop. And Ryan, he said he was in love with me. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I leaned against the wall, struggling to breathe. Does he still think that? I asked. I don't know, she said, shaking her head. I told him it had to stop. I told him it was a mistake, but what? She hesitated, and my stomach sank. But I think he's obsessed, she said quietly. He doesn't see it as a mistake. He thinks we're meant to be together. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vanessa and Ryan together, their betrayal playing out in vivid detail in my mind. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while Vanessa slept fitfully beside me. The next morning, I made a decision. If Ryan was as obsessed as Vanessa claimed, I needed to talk to him. But first, I needed more information. I retrieved the voice recorder I had hidden in Vanessa's purse and plugged it into my laptop. My hands shook as I scrolled through the files, each one labeled with a date and time. I clicked on the most recent file, recorded during Vanessa's visit to the motel. Ryan, this has to stop, Vanessa's voice said, her tone pleading. I can't stop, Vanessa, Ryan replied. His voice was filled with desperation. I love you. I know you love me too. Ryan, I don't. What we did was wrong. It can't happen again. It's not wrong if we're in love, he argued. Dad doesn't make you happy. I've seen it. You're happier with me. There was a long pause, and then Vanessa said, You're wrong. I love your father. This can't go on. Then why did you come here? Ryan shot back. Vanessa didn't respond. The recording ended, leaving me with more questions than answers. Fueled by a mix of anger and determination, I marched to Ryan's room and knocked on the door. Come in, he said casually. I opened the door, and he looked up from his desk, his expression unreadable. We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. About what? About you and Vanessa, I said, watching his reaction carefully. For a moment, his mask slipped, and I saw a flicker of guilt. But he quickly recovered, smirking at me. What about us? You know exactly what I'm talking about, I said, my voice low and steady. She told me everything, Ryan. I know what you've been doing. His smirk faded, replaced by a defensive glare. She wanted it too, Dad. Don't act like I'm the only one at fault. Hearing him say it out loud sent a fresh wave of anger through me. You're my son, Ryan. How could you do this to me? To our family? You don't understand, he shouted, standing up. I love her, Dad. I love her more than you ever could. His words hung in the air, cutting deeper than I thought possible. I don't care what you think you feel, I said, my voice trembling. This ends now. Do you hear me? It ends. He stared at me for a long moment, his expression defiant. Then he said, You can't stop us. I left the room, slamming the door behind me. The situation had spiraled completely out of control, and I had no idea how to fix it. I spent the rest of the day grappling with what Ryan had said. You can't stop us. His defiance, his complete lack of remorse. It was like I didn't know my own son anymore. Vanessa tried to talk to me a few times, but I couldn't even look at her. The woman I had married, the woman I loved, had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable. By the evening, I knew I had to take drastic action. Ignoring the problem clearly wasn't working, and every passing moment felt like a countdown to disaster. I decided to confront Vanessa and Ryan together. Maybe if I forced them to face the full weight of their actions, it would break through whatever delusions they were clinging to. After dinner, I called them both into the living room. Vanessa looked nervous, wringing her hands, while Ryan appeared calm, even smug. We're going to have a serious talk, I said, standing in front of them. And I want complete honesty from both of you. Vanessa glanced at Ryan, who met her gaze with a faint smirk. My stomach churned at the silent exchange. Ryan, I began. You told me earlier that I can't stop you. What did you mean by that? He leaned back in his chair, his arms crossed. Exactly what it sounds like. You can't control what happens between me and Vanessa. Vanessa's face turned pale. Ryan, stop, she said urgently. No, let him talk, I said, my voice ice cold. Ryan stared at me, his eyes filled with a twisted defiance. She doesn't love you, Dad. Not the way she loves me. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. Ryan, that's enough. I turned to her, my anger barely contained. Is that true, Vanessa? Do you love him? No, she exclaimed, tears streaming down her face. I don't love him. I told him that, but he won't listen. Ryan stood up abruptly, his fists clenched. She's lying. She does love me, she's just afraid to admit it. Admit what? I shouted, my patience snapping. That she made a terrible mistake? That you've been manipulating her? I didn't manipulate anyone, Ryan yelled back. You're just mad because she's happier with me than she ever was with you. The room fell silent, the tension so thick it was suffocating. That's it, I said finally, my voice shaking with fury. You're leaving this house, Ryan. Tonight. You can't kick me out, he said, his smirk returning. I have every right to be here. This is my house, I said, stepping closer to him. And as long as you live under my roof, you'll respect me and my marriage. If you can't do that, then you're not welcome here. Ryan stared at me, his jaw clenched. Then he grabbed his keys and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind him. Vanessa sank onto the couch, sobbing uncontrollably. I'm so sorry, Brian. I never meant for any of this to happen. But her words offered no comfort. The damage was done, and I wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. For the next few days, the house was eerily quiet. Ryan hadn't returned, and Vanessa and I barely spoke to each other. The silence gave me too much time to think, to relive every moment that had led to this nightmare. On the third day, I received a text from Ryan. You'll regret this. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. Was it a threat? Or just a childish attempt to scare me? Either way, it didn't matter. I was done letting him control the situation. Later that evening, Vanessa approached me hesitantly. Brian, we need to talk. I looked up from the kitchen table, where I had been nursing a cup of coffee. About what? About us, she said, sitting down across from me. About how we move forward from this. I let out a bitter laugh. Move forward? Vanessa, I don't even know if I can look at you without seeing what you've done. She flinched at my words but didn't back down. I know I've hurt you, Brian. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm begging you to give me a chance to fix this. How? I asked, my voice filled with disbelief. How do you fix something like this? You didn't just betray me, you betrayed our family. And with my own son, no less. Tears filled her eyes, but she held my gaze. I made a horrible mistake. I let things get out of control, and I didn't stop it when I should have. But I love you, Brian. I always have. Do you? I asked, my voice breaking. Because the woman I married would never have done something like this. She reached across the table, placing her hand on mine. Please, Brian. Let me prove to you that I'm still the woman you fell in love with. Let me make this right. I stared at her hand, torn between anger and the faintest glimmer of hope. Despite everything, a part of me still wanted to believe her. I don't know if I can trust you, I said finally. Then let me earn your trust back, she said, her voice trembling. I'll do whatever it takes. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. We both froze, exchanging a wary glance. I'll get it, I said, standing up. When I opened the door, my blood ran cold. Ryan stood on the porch, his expression dark and unreadable. And behind him, parked in the driveway, was a police car. I stood in the doorway, staring at Ryan and the police officer behind him. My heart raced as my mind scrambled to make sense of what was happening. What's going on, Ryan? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Ryan smirked, his defiance still intact. I just came to get some things, Dad. But I figured I'd bring some backup, in case you tried to kick me out again. The officer stepped forward, his expression neutral. Sir, your son called us to report that he was denied access to his belongings. We're just here to make sure he can retrieve them without any issues. I clenched my jaw, struggling to keep my anger in check. Ryan wasn't denied anything. He's welcome to get his things. He just doesn't live here anymore. The officer nodded, clearly uninterested in the family drama. Let's keep this quick then. Ryan pushed past me and headed upstairs. I followed him, making sure he didn't linger. He walked into his room, grabbing a backpack and stuffing it with clothes and random items. I hope you're happy, I said, keeping my voice low. Ryan turned to me, his smirk widening. I'll be happy when Vanessa's mine. Those words were like a slap to the face. My fist clenched at my sides, but I forced myself to stay calm. You're delusional, Ryan. She doesn't want you. We'll see, he said cryptically, zipping up the backpack and slinging it over his shoulder. He brushed past me on his way out, his smugness making my blood boil. When he reached the front door, he glanced over his shoulder at Vanessa, who was standing frozen in the kitchen. This isn't over, he said loud enough for both of us to hear. And then he was gone. The encounter left me shaken. Ryan's words echoed in my mind, filling me with dread. This wasn't just a family conflict anymore, it was a powder keg waiting to explode. Vanessa sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she gripped her coffee mug. Brian, I don't know what to do, she whispered. I sat across from her, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. He's obsessed, Vanessa. You said it yourself? But we can't let him tear this family apart. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, Brian. I never should have let it get this far. Sorry doesn't fix this, I said, my voice harsher than I intended. He's spiraling, Vanessa. He's not just hurting us, he's destroying himself. For the next few days, we tried to return to some semblance of normalcy. Vanessa went back to work, and I threw myself into my job, hoping the distraction would help. But the tension lingered, a constant reminder of the chaos Ryan had brought into our lives. And then, everything came crashing down. One evening, as Vanessa and I were sitting in the living room, we heard a knock at the door. My stomach sank. I wasn't expecting anyone, and after Ryan's last visit, I couldn't help but feel on edge. I opened the door cautiously, and there he was, Ryan, standing on the porch with a wild look in his eyes. "What do you want, Ryan?" I asked, my patience hanging by a thread. "I need to talk to Vanessa," he said, his voice low and urgent. "She doesn't want to talk to you," I said firmly. "She can speak for herself," he snapped, trying to push past me. But this time, I didn't let him. I blocked his path, my anger bubbling to the surface. "You're not welcome here, Ryan. Go home." "This is my home," he shouted, his face red with fury. "I'm not leaving until I see her." Vanessa appeared in the hallway, her face pale. "Ryan, please. You need to stop this. You're only making things worse." Her words seemed to enrage him further. "Worse? You think this is worse? You're the one who—" "Enough!" I roared, cutting him off. "Get out of here, Ryan, before I call the police again." For a moment, I thought he might lunge at me. But then he stepped back, his expression dark and menacing. "You'll regret this," he said, his voice filled with venom. "Both of you." And with that, he turned and stormed off into the night. Ryan's parting words lingered in my mind, a dark promise that left me sleepless for days. Vanessa tried to reassure me, saying he was just acting out and would eventually move on. But deep down, I knew better. His obsession wasn't something that would simply go away. I installed security cameras around the house and started locking every door and window religiously. Every knock at the door or sound outside made my pulse race. The tension was unbearable. Then it happened. One night, just after midnight, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. My heart leapt into my throat as I bolted out of bed. Vanessa sat up, her face pale with fear. "Stay here," I told her, grabbing the baseball bat I kept by the nightstand. I crept downstairs, my grip tightening on the bat. The living room window was broken, glass scattered across the floor. The front door was wide open, swaying gently in the wind. "Ryan?" I called out, my voice trembling. No response. I checked every room, my nerves fraying with each step. But the house was empty. Whoever had broken in was gone, or so I thought. As I turned to head back upstairs, I noticed something on the kitchen counter. A photograph. I picked it up, my stomach turning. It was a picture of Vanessa and me on our wedding day, the edges torn and frayed. Across my face, someone had scrawled a single word in red ink: liar. A chill ran down my spine. I didn't need to guess who had left it. The next morning, I went to the police. I showed them the photo and told them about Ryan's escalating behavior. They took my statement and promised to investigate, but their lack of urgency frustrated me. To them, it was just a family dispute. To me, it was a ticking time bomb. Vanessa and I spent the next few days on edge, jumping at every noise and shadow. We didn't hear from Ryan, but his absence felt more threatening than his presence. It was like the calm before the storm. And then the storm hit. 3 nights later, I woke to Vanessa shaking me awake. "Brian, someone's outside," she whispered, her voice trembling. I grabbed my phone and checked the security camera feed. There he was, Ryan, standing in the backyard, staring up at our bedroom window. I called the police, my hands shaking as I described the situation. "He's here," I said urgently. "He's in my backyard. An officer is on the way," the dispatcher assured me. But Ryan didn't wait for them to arrive. As I watched the camera feed, he moved closer to the house, carrying something in his hand. It was a gas can. My blood ran cold as he started pouring gasoline along the side of the house. I didn't think, I just acted. Grabbing the baseball bat, I ran downstairs and threw open the back door. "Ryan, stop!" I shouted. He turned to me, his face twisted with rage. "You ruined everything!" he screamed. "You did this to yourself!" I shouted back. "You need help, Ryan. This isn't the way." He laughed bitterly. "Help? The only thing I need is for you to disappear." He pulled a lighter from his pocket and flicked it open. "Don't!" I yelled, stepping closer. But before he could ignite the gasoline, the sound of sirens filled the air. Red and blue lights flashed in the distance, and Ryan hesitated. The police arrived just in time, tackling him to the ground before he could do any more damage. In the aftermath, I learned that Ryan had been spiraling for months, consumed by jealousy and resentment. The police found his journal, filled with pages of obsessive thoughts about Vanessa and disturbing plans to eliminate me. Vanessa and I were shaken to our cores, but in a strange way, the ordeal brought us closer. For the first time in months, we were honest with each other. "I don't deserve your forgiveness," she told me one night as we sat on the couch, holding hands. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I admitted. "But I'm willing to try. We can't let him destroy us." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, Brian. I promise." It wasn't a happy ending, but it was a beginning, a chance to rebuild brick by brick, one day at a time. Ryan was sentenced to mandatory psychiatric treatment, with no contact allowed between him and us. It was a bittersweet relief, knowing he was finally getting the help he needed but grieving the son I had lost to his own darkness. And as I looked at Vanessa that night, her hand in mine, I realized that while our family might never be the same, we still had a chance to heal. For now, that was enough.